Okay, so we finish with the real Lord's Prayer. That is John 17. And now we're going to go on to John 18. And this is when he's going to go into the garden and Judas brings the soldiers. Hear that coffee percolating in there. Wonder what that noise was. And this is that situation. So verse 1, I'll read. It says, when Jesus had spoken these words, that means the prayer in chapter 17. When he'd spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, into which he entered, and his disciples. In verse 2, and Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus many times resorted there with his disciples. So the garden that he went to is, of course, we all know is Gethsemane, right? And I went online and looked at some pictures. I was going to print out a really beautiful picture to show you guys, but my printer won't work. Oh. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it when I really needed it. But anyway, Gethsemane means olive press. That's what the word means. And so since there are so many olive trees there, I'm sure at that point in time they had an olive press. And there are lots of different places in that area where those trees are that people say this is Gethsemane. The church says this is, and everyone has their reasons for where they say it is, but the real truth is nobody knows exactly where it is. But some of the trees that are there, the really old ones, are older than when Christ would have been there.
Wow.
So there are some really old trees there. And, you know, I noticed when I'm reading the Bible about Jesus that lots of times he'll spend the night, it says, in the Mount of Olives. He's in that garden, sleeping, out in the open. Anyway, so he goes to Gethsemane. And although John doesn't talk about his prayer in the garden, Luke does, and I'll just read a little bit of that. Luke 22:39. Because this is going to come up later. It says, and he came out and went as he was wont to the Mount of Olives, with his disciples followed him. And when he was at the place, he said unto them, pray that ye enter not into temptation. So he told them to pray, and then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw. So that was pretty close. So they could probably hear what he was saying. And he kneeled down and prayed, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine. The cup he's talking about is the cross. And it's not just the pain of the cross. He'll be bearing the sins of the whole world. That's different than somebody just being crucified. Actually bearing those sins and then being literally punished, facing the judgment of God while he was on the cross. But this is a beautiful thing, is that when he says, not my will but thine, in the very next verse, once he says that, it says, and there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. So that's really great, that as soon as he said, not my will but thy will, God sent an angel, said, here, let me help you. Let me strengthen you.
That's beautiful.
It is. I never really noticed that before. Okay, so when Judas knew about the place, right? Well, Judas had to kind of calculate where Jesus would be. I'm sure he went other places too, but he did go to this place a lot. So I think Judas probably brought the mob there first because he figured this was the most likely place that he would go. So verse 3 says, Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, comes with lanterns and torches and weapons. Okay, so I'm going to explain what this means, this band of men. That's terminology for 300 to 600 Roman soldiers. I don't know if it was 3, 4, 5, or 6, but even 3 is a lot. Wouldn't be any less than 3, and it very likely could have been as much as 6. And then it says, and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees. Well, that would mean at the temple compound, they had security. And the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered up those men and the elders and sent their own group along with Judas. Because see, Judas, in order to get these Roman soldiers, he would have to go to the Roman authority and convince them that Christ was committing a crime. Otherwise, he could never get the soldiers. But he did. I'm sure he told them it was sedition, and that he said that Jesus said he was the Messiah and the King of Israel. The Roman government did not want another king. So they would consider that sedition. So that was how Judas was able to get all those men. And the detachment that would come from the temple compound would have been organized by the Sanhedrin. And you remember that the Sanhedrin was like the Supreme Court of Jerusalem.
Right.
And it was headed up by the high priest of Israel. So according to the law of the Sanhedrin, they were never supposed to arrest someone at night. So right now, when they sent that group, they're already breaking their own law, because that would be what would be considered a secret arrest. And then the chief priests were in violation because they couldn't be present while an arrest was occurring. So they're breaking all these laws, but hey, they want Jesus so bad, they don't care.
Yeah.
They're willing to break it. But the Romans actually weren't breaking any of their laws. They could do whatever they wanted. But you got to wonder, why did they think they needed so many people? Because Jesus had been known to do so many miracles. They're thinking, what if he starts doing a miracle? We need a bunch of people there to get one man. Think about it. It's very ironic. They came with lanterns and torches to get the light of the world. So verse 4 says, Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, who do you seek? Now, isn't that funny? The one guy who they're looking for, he comes to them and says, who are you looking for? He's going to offer himself up. So he completely knew what was going to happen. And then they answered, Jesus of Nazareth. Well, they were talking to Jesus of Nazareth. So obviously Judas, had this agreement that he would give a kiss to mark out the person, because the Romans would not know who he was. And I'm sure that the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees, they were all probably at the back, kind of hiding out, at the back of the crowd. And Jesus said unto them, I am. Now in my Bible, it says I am he. But he is in italics. And whenever there's a word in italics, just scratch it out. It's in italics because that's your clue that it was added by the translators, maybe to make it more understandable. But here it takes away, because he says, I am. And we know that that is the name of God. And this is what happened. They went backward. Think about all these men with torches, and fell to the ground. Think about it. These guys are ready for battle. They've got on their armor. They've got their swords. They've got everything. Their shields. They've got everything. They're an army. And they all went backwards. So when Jesus said that, they were looking for Jesus of Nazareth. But they discovered they found the living God. And I really believe that Jesus, by doing this, he was revealing who he was to them. He was giving them another chance. Look, you're coming to get God. There could have been earthquake. There could have been lightning. I don't know what. Or it just could have been the tone of his voice.
Right.
We don't know what it was. But whatever it was, it made them all hit the ground. I'm going to tell you some of the I ams that are just in the Gospel of John. He says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I am the true vine. So when he says I am, he's just saying he's God. And back in Exodus, the first time he gave himself that name, which is Yahweh, when Moses met him down on the backside of the desert by Mount Sinai, and he saw the burning bush, and when God asked him to go rescue the children of Israel, he said, well, who am I going to tell him sent me? And this is what he said. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, I am has sent you. So I am basically means the one who is absolutely self-sufficient. And he is a source of all life, all essential life. So when you think about this supernatural event that was occurring with these guys all falling down, I think the torches went to the ground too. Surprising they didn't start fire. But think about other times when Jesus used his voice, what happened? Remember when they were on the Sea of Galilee and the waves were huge and the wind was blowing, the disciples were so scared. And Jesus, just with his voice, he said, peace, be still. Mm-hmm. And it all went flat and the wind stopped. That was just his voice. Another time, with his voice, he cast out demons. He said, come out of him. These are the kind of things that he could do as the God-man with his voice. And when the Apostle John, this John who wrote this book, in Revelation, when Jesus spoke to him, it said he fell down as if he were dead. This showed his captors that they were powerless against him. They couldn't do anything without his permission.
Right.
If he can just say, I am, and they're all down, he's in charge. He's in charge of what's going on here in the garden. Okay, then verse 7. Then asked he them again. So Jesus, they're all, after a few minutes, they're, okay, let's get up. Let's get back into our army mode and get our torches up. We're going to get this guy. But here again, Jesus is going to them. And he asks them again, who do you seek? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. They still don't know that they're talking to Jesus. So even after he did that, it's very shocking that they didn't know. Of course, these are Romans. They might not know everything that's gone on in Jerusalem. I would say it would be at this time when Judas would have gone to give him that unholy kiss. Let's see. That is in Matthew 22:48 and 49. And it says, now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, meaning the Romans, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, the same as he. Seize him. Oh boy, he's a real loyal friend, isn't he? Mm-hmm. And forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, why are you come? And they came and laid hands on him. Okay, that's a little insert from another gospel, because when you just read one gospel, you're just getting one person's opinion who was there. And so that's why I'm reading some from the other gospels, because they were there too, and they have other things that they saw when they were there.
Right.
Okay, so they said, yeah, we're seeking Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus answered, I've told you that I am he, or that I am. Of course, this time he didn't use that voice that would knock him over. And he said, if you seek me, let these go their way. It would make sense that Jesus's cohorts, the people who followed him, you'd think they'd get arrested too. It'd be very likely, highly likely that they would arrest him. But you see who's in charge here? Jesus tells them, let these go, and
Right.
you're just going to take me. Well, after what he just did, I can understand why they would listen to him, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And it says that the saying might be fulfilled which he spake. Of them which you gave me, I have lost none. That's why he said, let these go. They don't have to be tortured. They don't have to die a martyr's death yet. But when did he say that? He said that in that prayer. He said in John 17:12, while I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name, those that you gave me, and none of them is lost. See, that's what he was doing right there. But the son of perdition, that is Judas. Okay, so I want to read something else that Jesus says to this group, to this mob. He says, are ye come out against me as a thief with swords and staves to take me? I sat with you teaching in the temple, and you didn't lay a hand on me. So this is pretty strange. And you know, the reason why the Pharisees wanted to do it at night, basically, was because they were afraid to do it during the day because so many people were following Jesus. They thought, well, we can't take him during the day. It'll make us look bad, putting on a false arrest on this guy. So that's another reason they wanted to do it at night. And at Passover, it's always a full moon. So Jesus, and besides all the torches and lanterns, Jesus would have clearly been able to see these guys coming, and he volunteered himself. Okay, now we're going to get to the part where Peter is going to try to defend Jesus. This is verse 10. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear, and the servant's name was Malchus. Well, don't think of a big sword like a soldier's sword. It wasn't that. Disciples didn't go around carrying those kind of weapons. It would have been a small ceremonial knife, maybe about that big. So he pulls this out. He probably had it secured somewhere on his person, and it's probably a bad shot because he only cut off the ear of the guy. But John is the only one who gives that servant's name. There's something very interesting that is said to him, and this is Matthew's account, who was also there that night. Then Jesus said to him, to Peter, put up again your sword into its place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Don't you know that I can pray right now to my Father, and he will presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? What he's saying is, I'm not in any danger. I'm God. I could call all these angels down. There'd be one apiece for these guys, and it would only take one angel to knock them all down. But that's what he's telling Peter. Don't defend me. And this is what Jesus says in John 18. Put thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father has given me, shall I not drink it? Now, when we were reading about in the garden, when he said, this cup, not my will but thine, I'm going to drink this cup, which means he was going to offer himself willingly. So now, Jesus is of his own free will submitting himself to his enemies. And he's not going to do anything else to protect himself. He's taking care of his disciples. They're not going to hurt his disciples, even though you think they would arrest Peter for what he just did. They won't, because Jesus said, let them go. So from this point on, he is going to be a sheep that is brought to the slaughter. A sheep before his shears is done. That's the way it's going to be for the rest of the time. And so we will get on with verse 12 when they start to capture him and take him to his kangaroo court.